Now, we're going to have to bring on some chairs here for the next portion of our program. This is a part that you folks usually really like a lot. This is going to be the foreshadowing of the upcoming legislative session. You got the long bios, remember, in your packets, but as the next three people come forward, I'll just give you a little bit about them. Representative Coleman, as you can see there, was a career educator, teacher, and administrator, and he's a motivational speaker, so we always like him to bring that skill set that he's so good with to one of our panels. Always makes it interesting. Senator Tippins is a businessman, has his own company. Interestingly, his perspective education is augmented with his experience of being on the Cobb County School Board, in fact being chair of that board for a number of years. And then Kelly McCutchen is the president and CEO of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. He's just finished his 2 decades there. We thought it would be interesting to have not just 2 legislators, but someone who is very involved in policy issues with a different perspective than being a legislator. Kelly and I serve on the Georgia Chambers Board, and he's also on their Education Committee. That gives us 3 perspectives. So gentlemen, if you'll come forward and take a seat. What we're going to ask them to do is each take a turn to briefly give you their forecast for the upcoming session. But we're going to leave most of the time for you because you usually suck up this whole time for Q&A. So we're going to give you that opportunity. But then we'll let each of them have a brief summary comment at the end. So gentlemen, welcome, and we'll just start on this end with Senator Tippins.
Hello, it's good to be with you this afternoon. I'll give you a very brief synopsis of what I see the major issues in the upcoming session. The number one issue that you always see is the level of educational funding that the state's going to have in the FY15 budget. All school districts, school systems, and boards of education wait expectantly to see what that budget number is so they can look at their existing budget in terms of the supplemental budget and also the upcoming year. It's a very big issue. They also, most of the time in the spring of the year, get the revenue estimate from the local tax assessors as to what the digest is going to be. That's a very big issue and has been for the last 5 years or 6 years since we've been in a recession. Some counties are recovering well, some are not doing very well, but overall, I think statewide, the digest have fallen. I know in my local county of Cobb in the last 5 years, the digest has shrunk by a little over 17%. So that's huge in terms of the fact of the amount of funds available for local school districts. And most local school districts get the majority of their local funding from the local tax digest. And then the state funding provides, in most cases, a little bit less than 50% of the total funding that school districts receive. I guess the second biggest issue that's probably been the most noteworthy in the state is the Common Core legislation that Senator Logan has. It's still pending in the Senate, and I cannot tell you right now what the outcome of that's going to be. I will say this: I think the governor has acted very prudently back in the spring and early summer when he withdrew Georgia from the testing consortium. I think most people that understand the process of education realize that whoever controls the test is going to ultimately drive the curriculum and what's taught in the classroom, and who controls the testing piece, that's very, very critical. The governor has also charged the State Board of Education to do an extensive review of the Common Core standards in math and English language arts. And I'll say those are the only 2 domains that have been adopted at this time. He has charged the State Board of Education to do an extensive review of those standards to make a determination. Are they as rigorous as they should be, and if they are not, make suggestions as to how they can be augmented or supplemented. And I think the State Board of Education, the conversations I've had with them, has taken that charge very seriously. Thirdly, I guess the other issue that may or may not come up, there's a piece of pending legislation, I think, in the House about modifying SPLOST as to whether those funds can be used uses or remain only for capital expenditure. There's also some talk about having another piece of legislation to give school districts the ability to impose a local 1% sales tax for maintenance and operations. I think these are probably the biggest impact issues that we'll face in the upcoming year. There'll be some more legislation that will be brought. I know there'll be some legislation brought dealing with the zero tolerance of weapons in schools and doing away with the zero tolerance policy. And I'll say this as a disclaimer. The two bills that are being looked at now were done prior to the federal attorney general, U.S. Attorney General, calling for this action to be taken. And I think they're both coming from the Republican caucus, one in the House and one in the Senate. The zero tolerance weapon laws have caused a problem in schools, and I think we'll see some legislation dealing with that this year. I'll wrap up my comments with that.
Representative Coleman wanted me to go next. I guess he's got a big announcement for us.
No, I just want to just hear what's the real concern.
Well, I'm certainly not going to suggest that I know better than these two fine gentlemen what's going to happen in the legislature. I'd like to take my time to really talk about two things that I think are very positive going on in education that a lot of people don't talk about. The first is as we shift from measuring absolute performance to student growth. And that's a huge transition, but I think it's really important to be so much more fair. And imagine if Senator Tippins and I were two teachers, and under the old system, my kids were in the 90th percentile and his were in the 70th percentile. Assume I was, my school, my class was doing so much better. But then what if you knew that my kids started off in the 95th percentile and actually went backwards, and his started off in the 40th percentile? Made huge gains. And that's what we have in some of our schools. We've been studying schools for years in Georgia. You got some of those great stories. And that's really the most important information. We've never had that before. And so the CCRPI and this whole effort to look at student growth is really important and much more objective. Second is the state's longitudinal data system. Not a very sexy name, but I know Walter has written a lot of articles a long time ago in Georgia about a lot of money wasted in our state on trying to put together a state data system. It took years and years and years, and many, many systems didn't work. And quietly, sort of under the radar, over the last few years, the Department of Education has put together a system that works. We have, I think, 7 years of historical data now. Every teacher in the state has access to this system. When a new child transfers into their classroom, they immediately can go online. They don't have to go find some file in the basement. You go online and pull out all the records, the test scores, all the history for that child. They can have a dashboard view of student absences, how important that is for learning. And now, every child, you can drill down into each standard on the test questions they missed. And assign resources. We have 22,000 resources, extracurricular videos and other types of resources that the kids can learn and help leverage the teacher's time. And I think that is going to have a huge impact. And I'm even more excited as a parent. What they're working on, I think it's going to be available this year, is a color-coded knowledge map. They call it a learning pathway, where, for example, you go to a student-teacher meeting, you pull up the first subject for your child. It lists all these dots, all the math standards from K through 12 that your child's going to have to master, and they're all color-coded. Green, in which they've mastered them, yellow, meaning they're proficient, and red, meaning they did not meet the standard. And very simple to look and see where the holes are in your child's knowledge. And imagine if you're going off in the summer, now you know what to get your child to go do, because that child now is going to be able to go and click on those red dots. It's fractions, watch a video about fractions, and then do some practice tests and work on it, as opposed to just some vague, you need to work on math over the summer. And I just think that alone is going to be very empowering. And if you haven't seen this system, I'm sure the Department of Education can put together a demo for you, but it really is powerful. And it doesn't get, it's not open to the public appropriately, but they have a demo site available that you can look at it. So I think there are a lot of things good going on in education in Georgia. I think the student achievement results and the improvement that we've been making over the last 10 years is a good indication of that. We can do a lot better, but there are some good things happening. Thanks.
It's good to be with you. I always enjoy this and get to meet with this group. But I want them to go first because they have really talked about the key issues that we think all these committees and all these gurus think are so important with education this year. But I don't know how many of you attended, but we did something this year in the Senate and the House that's never been done in the history of this state. We took a tour. We decided that we needed to go out there and see what was really happening. And I'm going to tell you, my eyes were open, weren't yours, Lindsey? I had never in my life been overwhelmed. I thought at first, this is just going to be an activity, just go out there. But I was really overwhelmed and humbled by what I saw. We decided we'd take a tour. How many of you attended one of our listening sessions? Don't you agree? It was just awesome, some of the things we heard. And I want your names afterwards because I need to get with you because we're going to do a little something in the next couple of weeks with you, those of you who attended. But we took 8 listening sessions throughout the state. We started out in Noonan, went up to Dahlonega. We hit Gwinnett County, Vidalia, Eastman. We hit Albany. We went to Savannah. We went to Augusta and ended up. Not only did we just listen, but we also visited schools. And I'm going to tell you, we saw a lot of things going on and we saw a lot of diversity in this state. We had over 150 of the 180 superintendents that attended these sessions. They met with us from 3 to about 4:30 every time we met. We had over 200 board members that attended and talked with us from about 4:30 to 5:30. And then we did something that teachers had asked us to do. We never had. They said, we can't come to your education meetings. Do something where we could be there. So we started from 6:30 to almost 9 o'clock. We had one meeting, what was it, about 60 people who spoke. But we had busloads of teachers who came, over 1,500 teachers, parents, community leaders that came and talked to us about their concerns and the things they liked about education. We were really well. And you heard what Kelly talked about, you heard what Lindsey talked about, and that has really helped mold what a lot of things we want to do this year. We think we need to do because we listen to these superintendents and think. And I just want to summarize quickly, and then we'll take your questions, the things they said. That the people out there where the rubber meets the road, what they said. First of all, they said the same thing, budget. Money is important. Money is acceptable way to say I love you. Come on, love us a little bit. Give us some money, they said out there. And they were concerned. They said start restoring the austerity cuts. GPEE, the governor, we're talking about in the 2015, maybe revising the funding formula. Let's start restoring some of that money. We know we don't have the money to do it all, but let's do some of that. Put the money in the fund and let us have the flexibility to use it how we want to. Restore school days. We were shocked to find that most systems did not have 180 days out there. I think the lowest we saw, Lindsey, was 150. One school system had 150 days. We were shocked to see the number of furlough days that were out there. They said that would be a teacher raise if we just restore furlough days. So give us some, start helping us there. That was the one thing. Another thing they did, they talked about SPLOST. We have 10 systems out there that over the years ago, were given the right to use SPLOST for M&O. They were doing fine. We were shocked to see that those systems really did not have as much of a financial problem as some of the others that did not have that right. So they were saying, give us the right to take that SPLOST, to use it for M&O if we don't need it for capital. And there is a proposal for another. And we're not talking about something that we're going to mandate. They said just give us the option. Let it be a local decision there. They talked about something else that's very important. They talked about the teacher evaluation system. We hear a lot of criticism about that, but I was surprised that teachers said we like it. We had teachers that said, for the first time since I've been teaching, a principal's actually spending 4 or 5 days in my classroom. He's spending time. He's talking. We like it. The principals and superintendents said we don't have enough hands to do it. And people, I'm speaking in my auction speed, so if you want me to slow down, I'll sold and I'll slow down. That's right. I'm a licensed auctioneer also, and I do that sometimes. But they talked about that. They like it, but they need more hands to do it. Testing. They said, some of them said we're over-testing. We need to look at the whole thing of testing. Lindsey made a statement, every meeting we went to said, these concerns, you have to write them down. Give us examples. We want to know what your concerns are. They have concerns about so many policies, so many laws that are tying their hands. We instructed them, send us those examples. And in our Title 20 reduction we look at every year, we'll take a look at those. And if we need to get rid of them, we will. Do you know we had a law on the books that said you could not have computers in a classroom? Wow. Wasn't that interesting? So those are kind of things we looked at. Kelly, I love what you said about the information base. But you know what broke our heart? We were in some of the South Georgia systems. They don't have the bandwidth to use it. They have to go home That principal, where was it? John, that said that she goes to the crossroads and parks in her car where she can get the bandwidth. That's sad, people. So we need to work on that, Kelly. That's, technology is critical, and we're in the dark ages in some of the areas there. Did you know that 100 plus of the systems are smaller than one of the metropolitan high schools? Can you imagine? We met one system that had 400 students, K-12. Had one superintendent, she was the bus driver and everything else, custodian and all. It's unreal what we found in some of those areas. They praised the equalization. They praised the austerity. They praised want us to keep that up, sparsity grants to help those out. And that's why I encourage the governor in the next year to really look at how we're funding. QBE, people, hasn't been updated. We need to look at it. No one said it was wrong. They said, let's fix it. Let's look at how to help those other systems. I think something that was really great that it came out of these, I want to summarize and we'll get to your questions. Common Core. Now I want to tell you, Common Core is a discussion everywhere. We had a group of people that followed us, Lindsey, to every one of them, the same people everywhere. We had the anti, we had the pro. 100% of the superintendents, with the exception of one, he was for it, just wanted us to look at some of the standards, said, let's keep it. We've gone too far. They're standards. That's what they are. All of Georgia's standards in there. We need to correct them. We need to look at them. We need to revise them where they need to be. We spent 3 years getting ready. We've spent millions of dollars. You want to hurt teacher morale? Even the teacher said that unanimously. Don't make us start all over, change it every time we do something different. Let's stay the course for a while. Then we had the anti. No, it's bad. We need to look at it, and we'll talk about that. I'm sure you'll have some questions about that. We had the career pathways. They liked that, the new career pathways. They concerned about enough advisors to advise the students doing that. They liked that. No unfunded mandates, they said. They said, when you pass legislation, what's it going to do to us? Let's look at that. With health care, and those are just some of the things it said. But I think that most of our South Georgia counties could not survive without the RESAs. Y'all know what that is, Metropolitan Service Agencies help them out. They said they could not survive without that. And I want to close my part by saying, I'm just glad to be with you. How many of you know Mr. Murphy from the Gwinnett Post? You might have ever heard of him, the editor up there. He spoke at a Rotary Club the other day, and he was talking about reporting of the future. And he was saying, reporters used to get the story, you had time to look at it, analyze it, talk to the reporter about it, and then it appeared in the paper the next day. He said, and it's happening right here. I noticed you doing it. Maureen, I see you doing it, baby. It's happening right now. But he said, you're in the news immediately. I mean, as you speak, it's out there. So people, it's out there right now, so let's get it going. You have a tough job. It's your job to keep it right, keep it correct, and we want to work with you. And when I summarize, I want to give a charge to you and ask for some volunteers to help with a good project we've got. Thank you so much for having us. And this note he gave me, he says, you are in front of the computer. We're sorry for putting all the information on your head, so that's okay. That's So I guess questions, is that it?
So just open it up, just direct your questions to anybody.
Please stand up, tell us where you're from.
Hi, Michelle Worth, WABE. Want to know what Senator and Representative, what do you both think about the Common Core as of right now? How do you feel about it? Do we stay the course or drop?
You're talking about the standard.
The standard,
Oh.
yeah.
I've had a great deal of skepticism about it, because I'm always skeptical when the federal government starts going into an area that should be in the state domain. When you look at the history of it, you see that the standards or the initiation for the creation of the standards was done, that came out of the governor's conference, and really the federal intervention and intrusion in it never really came until the race to the top funds came down, and that's when the federal government really got co-opted into it. That's why I say I believe the governor was correct in withdrawing from the testing consortium. I think in terms of management of the education process, you have got to have standards. You've got to have comparisons to know how you're doing comparatively with the top-ranked districts in the United States and internationally. As far as withdrawing from Common Core, personally, I'm not sure whether the local districts can afford to do that. It would be my estimate, it'll take between $150 and $200 million if you were to do a across-the-board curriculum adoption in both English and language arts. It may be more economical to take the course, I believe it is, to take the course that the governor has chosen to review the standards, and if they're deficient, tweak them and come out with a modified or an enhanced set of standards that Georgia will live by. If the federal government's got a problem with us doing that, then I think we may have to go to our own standards. But I think we always ought to maintain sovereignty over our standards. As to whether it's going to pass or fail, I think it's probably a political issue. Some parts of the state, it's a non-issue, judging from the feedback that we got and are listening to it. I think in North Georgia, it's more of an issue than it is in Middle and South Georgia. It will remain to be seen. I think we have to have a education system that's affordable and works. And as Chairman Coleman said, one of the great concerns that the local boards of education and the superintendents have said, if we have another change, what are we going to change to? What's the cost of transition going to be? And what is the time value cost in doing the conversion? So I think if the standards, the short answer, after the long one, if the standards can be tweaked and get to the point that we're comfortable that they're the most rigorous standards that we can adopt, then I think that's fine. We can leave them as they are. And we can do that if we maintain our own sovereignty.
Yeah. And I want to say that where we heard the most concern was within math. And I got to realize we moved from a integrated math, you remember the problem, and some of the systems are just finishing that. We talked to a couple of systems that have that now in the 11th and 12th grade. They're allowing their students to complete that back to traditional whatsoever. And we know there's some deficiencies. Barbara Hampton with the state board does a magnificent job explaining and how they're looking at the math standards. I think there's some gaps, there's some overlaps. But when we realized that probably when Sonny Perdue was governor, where it even started out in History High School, years ago when they started talking about this with some Southern governors. But I think if we tweak it, look at it, and correct where we should, I think, like Lindsey, I don't want to just repeat what he said, but we're talking about a tremendous cost if we look at it, if we try to change everything right away. But it's the teachers, you talk to them. What's so interesting, most of the time their concerns were curriculum, not standards. The standard is the what, the curriculum is the how. We remember we were in South Georgia and this group got up just furious about reading material. They were forced to read. And you remember it was Rosa Parks. They were very upset. And this superintendent said they were saying that Washington enforced that. No. The superintendent said, that was my decision. She said, my system is 98% African American and we wanted to use that. That was perfect for our standards. That's why we chose that. Washington didn't make us do that. So curriculum is a local decision. We need to leave it that way. So thank you. Yeah. Other questions? You push that one as far as you want to push it.
And I'm not even going to answer, but there's a candidate for superintendent, and on her platform is to not take one dime of federal money and therefore not be beholden to the federal government. I believe Texas may be doing that. Just curious, I mean, if we got rid of it's a very small percentage of our overall education budget. How would you feel? Would you support not taking any federal money and going on your own?
That's an interesting question. I had that the other morning. I was at a meeting and that person you're talking about was there. And this question was asked, said, well, are we going to stop feeding the children because 99% of our lunch money is federal? Are we going to, we're going to do away with the breakfast program, lunch? I mean, I'm just saying, and we could do that, but, I've heard that option mentioned several times. And special ed, millions of dollars from the special ed program. If people are not aware, we're right now looking at the special ed program, the VD, the LD, and it's growing tremendous, it's a tremendous growth. And of course, a lot of that are federal mandates that require a lot, and of course, a lot of federal money there. So you're looking at two tremendous programs that would be immediately affected. And legally, that's another thing. You could maybe refuse it, but what are you going to legally be able to do with the special ed or feeding children, some of those things.
So it would be a difficult, so you're basically
I'm not saying
you're not for
it could be done, yes, but what are you going to do with those mandates to do and pick that money up?
One interesting aspect of the Supreme Court decision on the Affordable Care Act is that the Supreme Court said, the requirement was going to be if you did not expand Medicaid, they were going to take away all of the Medicaid funding. That was the threat. And they said that's an abuse of the spending authority in the Constitution. Many legal scholars have looked at similar issues in education, such as Title I or other title programs, and have indicated if that decision is applied the appropriately to education, that would mean the federal government could not enforce those strings.
That's right.
And pull a large amount of money away. So some of those concerns have been rectified by the Supreme Court decision.
I think it's probably a correct statement to say usually in the M&O budget, the federal portion of participation is relatively small, but when you get into the title program, you're talking about considerably more money, and most of the districts handle that outside of the M&O budget. The special ed would be, the funding for that is tremendously expensive in terms of what it costs to educate a special ed student, about 3.5, on average, about 3.5 to 400% of what it does of a regular ed student. And I know in most of the districts now, they're running from 10 to 15% of their students who receive these services. It's extremely expensive to carry on these services.
The vast majority of those funds are also local.
No, vast majority of special ed, I believe,
better?
is federal.
A lot better. You've said a lot. What's that time? I want to,
You have 7 more minutes
that's what I want to
before the
hear.
wrap up.
All right, other questions, another topic, probably, yeah.
Hi, Christina Cassidy with the Associated.
I don't have my hearing aid in, so speak up.
Sorry, Christina Cassidy with the Associated Press. It sounds like the conversation is going to be mostly focused on trying to restore some of the funding and not necessarily tweak QBE during this legislative session. We're staring at a $1 billion gap there between what's sort of recommended under QBE and what the state has done. So if you could tell me a little bit about how much you think we'll be able to get closer to a situation where there are more school districts, meeting the 180-day state minimum, and fewer teacher furloughs.
You know, I felt so good when we met with some of these superintendents. And then you remember, we were down in some of the South Georgia counties, and the guy from Augusta especially, you know, he said, let me tell you, we were a little fat. He said, I don't think we need to put the whole, billion back. He said, but somewhere between, he said, I don't know if it's 100 million, I don't know if it's 300 million, I don't know if it's 500 million. He said, the new reality is somewhere between. And he said there was a lot of fat. He said we're cutting bone now. And so to answer your question, that's what the governor's proposed, when we look at this highway fund. But what bothered me more than that was when I found that one of the systems down in down near the Augusta area, remember she said 1 mill generated $33,000 a month, where let's say in Cobb, 1 mill generated what was 10 million. And they were saying that they don't have a Walmart. And they said they would like to see the sales tax distributed by zip code, something like that. So when you look at those things, I think the issue is how to help those systems. We've got to look at how to really help those poor systems. We had 19 systems that are on the verge of bankruptcy, because of the... And another thing that distressed us, we found, you can go up to 20 mills. I had no sympathy for that system that said, we're hurting, but we're charging, 12 and a half or 13 mills. When we're saying, well, up here in the metro area, we're at 19 and 20 mills, some 25. Let's tax yourself. You've got to have the pain, no gain. So, yeah, does that answer your question? So it's somewhere there. I don't know where it is. We need to find
But
out.
do you feel confident that there's going to be enough of a desire at the legislature to put that money towards education to make sure that we're lifting up as many of those school districts as possible? And are we going to...
Lindsey can speak for himself. $1 billion, no, but somewhere in between, yes.
I think we'd be careful to
Yeah.
focus so much on the $1 billion
There you
number.
go.
Because this is a formula that was done when I was in high school, 1985, and everyone agrees it's outdated
Nothing.
and antiquated. So I don't know why we keep looking at that. So are schools underfunded right now after the recession? Absolutely. I think there are a lot of situations, some more than others. You also look at administrative spending versus money going to teachers. There are a lot of other factors why we need to focus, this aid that we can give them, because next year, when we get to reforming the funding formula, put more money in this antiquated system, it's going to make reform that much harder politically. Sort of like tax reform, revenue-neutral tax reform, there are winners and losers. Same thing with education funding reform. So that's something that the legislators got to balance this year.
Well, one thing that bothers me is I've heard some of my colleagues say, and this is the point of $1 billion, austerity cut. They said, well, this is the new normal and the schools need to just get used to it. The bottom line is, if we get used to this, the schools will starve to death.
They're gonna
The
die.
only way they're surviving right now is because they've gone to shorten calendars and larger class sizes, none of which I don't believe are good academically. I think what we need to do is take a different approach and make a valid determination of what the cost to well-educated child in the state of Georgia is. When we make that cost determination, then fund to that level, but you also then have safeguards to make sure that there's efficiencies and that people are doing the job academically that they need to be doing.
The accountability.
Performance. Just to pick an arbitrary number and say this is what we're going to fund to, I think would be a mistake, but we need to really look at what true costs are.
Yeah.
But looking at other states, if you look at Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, some states that on NAEP scores and graduation rates have done better than we have, we're spending more than all of them, according to the most recent per pupil expenditures. So, not saying that what we're spending is correct, but you have to give some context to evaluate some of these
You
figures.
know, one thing we found, this shocked us. We have, what was it, they said they have eliminated, you know, teaching, they say no jobs available. The reason is, boy, they eliminated, was over 3,000 teaching, I can't remember how many teachers have been eliminated through these austerity cuts because, let's take Gwinnett, for example, one additional child added to every classroom would keep them from having to hire a couple of hundred teachers. You know, but what it's done is put 24 students in that first grade class. So, you know, I'm like you, we need to look at what's the best way to do it. And flexibility is the only way they've survived. Flexibility with funding, class sizes, the three ways: salary, salaries, and and expenditure control and class sizes. One thing that they talked about too. Suppose we want to teach a journalism class in one of our schools. Why do we need to go hire a full-time teacher, pay them a salary? Why don't we hire one of you, contract, you have an education, you're the specialist in that area, let you come in and teach one day. You don't have to have a teaching certificate, but pay you, give you a salary, you don't have to pay benefits. Same thing with the physics teacher, whatever. We're looking at things like that. That's how some of them have survived, right, Kelly? Other question? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Carol Matthews from Cherokee Ledger News. Just for any of you, they've already cut to the bone, so here they need more funding. What do y'all think about the SPLOST situation? Like if maybe they can take some of that capital funding and use it for M&O, or also, you know, a lot of times with economic incentives, these big businesses come in and have to pay property taxes, and then the schools don't see the profit off that. How do you think that pays for itself in the new jobs?
Well, in terms of modifying the SPLOST as we have it now, which is only dedicated toward capital projects, I believe that you enhance the availability of tools to the local district, because there's not one solution that's going to work for all the districts. If you take, I mean, this is a generalization, but you take a county that does not have a Walmart, and the sales tax is not going to help them a great deal. I think your more urban counties that you have a good sales tax return, they probably need the ability to use some of that funding for M&O. And the reason is, I think sometimes they feel like they're forced to build out a capital projects list in a SPLOST initiative, and sometimes the maintenance cost of these going forward, they'd be better off to reallocate some of those funds to current M&O needs. That's my personal opinion, and I think if we open that law, we ought to open it to the fullest extent to give the local boards of education the ability to put before the voters whichever solution meets their local situation the best.
Yes, sir.
We talk a lot about funding for education. I guess the choice comes down to either taking it from another part of the budget or raising taxes. And is that decision solely the purview of the governor, or would the legislature ever take the lead in doing things any differently than what he proposes?
Brooks been there 20 years.
It would be very difficult. You know, on our listening session, exactly what you said proposed. So, almost every session, they say, you know what, why don't you in the legislature just go ahead and let's propose another penny sales tax statewide and distribute it out, by zip code. They give us all kinds of, exotic ways. But I'm gonna be honest with you, I think the appetite right now, and I think we agree, Lindsey, that it's just not there for something like that. Look what just happened with the T-SPLOST, and so I think that, but I think we need to give the locals many options as they can have with, and what was refreshing to me with those 10 systems that had the option to do that, how well they were doing versus the ones that didn't have it. So
There was a guy by the name of Tom Murphy who came
Yeah.
up with this idea a while back, that was it 2 or 3 pennies?
that was it.
I think 2 or 3 penny increase in state tax to eliminate property tax funding of
Yep.
education. So you had a tax increase at the state level, but that was good politics at the local level, get rid of property tax funding, which is usually 60% of your property tax bill. I don't know if something like that would ever go, but it's been proposed before.
And it's out there now. It was proposed in our hearings.
But if you did that on a local basis, I mean, we've got the local fair share now, but I think if you said you've got 3 cents, it goes totally to education, I think you'd see the state pretty much take over control of all the funding and allocate the funding ever how they felt like, and you'd have very little local control over your local programs unless you had additional funding sources locally. But if you did it all statewide and did away with property tax, because basically the property tax is the county funding piece. But it is a question of how much autonomy do you want over part of the funds. And I think you need to be careful what you ask for. You may get it.
One thing that they said over and over again on this flexibility and accountability. 2015, you need to realize, right now, there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom out there for the school systems because in order to survive, the legislature allowed increased class sizes, expenditure control, flexibility of salaries, a lot of different things. But by 2015, they're supposed to choose I-square, you've heard that one, that's flexibility control. You've heard the charter systems, don't confuse it with charter schools. You've heard them talk about the status quo. They want a superintendent out there that liked the word status quo. So nobody wants to be status quo. And most of them, if you've seen, they've actually done well. Most systems are doing better. They said, call us strategic systems or whatever. But they want more options for flexibility. Many of them said, if we're doing well, leave us alone. Let us go. Hold us accountable. Not one system said we don't want to be accountable, but give us the flexibility, hold us accountable, and do. And they're saying, you take some of these freedoms away, or we're going under. That's what scared us, wasn't it?
But going back to your question about raising taxes, what are you going to do? I think as a legislator, you have to look at the aspect, the Bible says, wherever your heart is, that's where your money's going to be too. I'm all for economic development, absolutely, because if you don't have a vibrant economic growth in the state, you're not going to have a strong funding mechanism. But I do believe this, education is probably the strongest component that we have as to drawing businesses to the state of Georgia. Most businesses are concerned, they want to go to an area that has strong public education. And to do that, we have to realize we've got to fund it to be able to deliver it. And to do that, I think as a state, we have to set priorities in our spending and make a determination what's absolutely the most important area that we have to fund. And we have costs that are built in, we have very little control over. But in the discretionary funding and also in the funding increases, and I'll say this, the state revenues percentage-wise have increased more than what the local funding tax digests have in the last 5 years. I mean, they've recovered at a better percentage rate. But I think we have to make a determination of what's really the most important and what will do most to move the ball economically in economic development. And I believe education will do it.
I do. And I'm going to have to say, sum it up, we are not funding where we should be. That's the way I feel. We've got to do more. Where it is, we need to find out in the state. I see we've been, what do you want to do, sum up?
Yes, please.
You want to start, Lindsey, sum up?
No, I've started.
You've already summed up. You summed up, you want to sum up? I'm going to sum up with something. I want to give you something. I read something the other day. How many of you have ever read this? The Dash? I'm going to leave this with you, and I want you to take this to heart. This poem has changed my life. Linda Ellis, who lives in Marietta, wrote this poem. If you ever get a chance to meet her, she is a God-sent one. She is a great lady, and she wrote this. And this poem, if you ever look at a tombstone, it says, the birth, dash, the death. I want you to listen to this, only 19 lines, and I want to leave you with it. And I want you to live your life this way, people, because as a reporter, you have an obligation. You have an obligation to yourself and to your family. Because I'm going to tell you, to a child, to a person, love it is spelled T-I-M-E, time. the time he gives. Just listen to this, and I want to sum it up. I want you to go this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of her birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters most is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, be less quick to anger, show appreciation more, and love the people in your life like you've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that the special dash may only last a little while. So when your eulogies are being read and your life actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? People, you're lucky. You got a long dash left. Live it right. Tell your children you love them, your family you love them, people you love them, work with them. And I wish you the best. And may you have a long dash, a wonderful life, and a great new year. Thanks for having us with you. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Kelly, you gonna follow that or just?
I don't think we can follow that.
Yeah.